What's going on, guys? What's going on, guys? We are live here. It's Sunday morning, 9:20. I posted a couple of questions on Friday and Thursday, and I got a couple responses. So we'll answer those questions as we get going here. We'll probably start with the first question I got, which was orange peel on my lacquer. What happens when I get orange peel on my lacquer? That's the first question. Hey, Chris, what's going on? Can you hear me okay? Just want to double check that. What's up, guys? We're having no audio issues, right? You can hear me, I hope. All right, question number one was orange peel on my guitar. How do I fix orange peel? Essentially, when you get orange peel on your guitar, what it means is you're laying your lacquer on and you're getting little divots in between your lacquer. And as it's drying, it sort of shrinks slightly. And so what you need to do is just continue to add layers and wet sand. So if you apply lacquer the first time, do a couple of coats, let it sit, apply a couple of more coats, then you would wet sand it, you'd level that lacquer, and then you'd hit it with one more coat. Usually you should get a pretty perfect finish at that point. Orange peel is something that we all fight with, and usually that just means apply another coat and do more sanding and make sure you've got the right grits from 320 up to 1500, 2000, and you should be pretty good with that. You always want to step up in grits, and when you're wet sanding, you don't want to use a real high grit. You only really want to use 320 as a starting if you've got sort of a rough feel. Usually with wet sanding, you want to start at 600. So if you still get orange peel and you're starting with 600, usually that means you don't have enough material down to sort of fill those gaps as you've got it. So that was question number one on orange peel and how do you fix it. For this podcast, if you guys have questions, just flip them in and I'll answer them as I'm going. I think that's the best thing. I do have a special surprise for you guys that are on now. And if you're following me on Instagram, you got to see the pictures in process of that. This thing is monster. It's a double neck telly I'm working on for Kevin Bond of In Minor. It is the black cherry burst that you guys asked for. So I filmed it. You'll see it shortly, but it's black, sanded back, orange, and then red. And you get that awesome coloring. It's really hard to pick up red on the camera, but this actually looks pretty good. It's a black back, Corinna. But this video is coming shortly. I know you guys wanted to see a stain video, so maybe that'll keep you guys interested here as we're doing the live video. So if you're late after the first 15 of you joined, you just missed my awesome double neck. All right, so the second question we had was fret slotting and cutting. What's my process? How do I do it? I've done a couple neck videos, but what I like to do is cut the fret slot first, and then radius it, and then go back and get it to the correct depth. That takes a little bit of work to get it right, but I've got that fret slotting template from Stu Mack. I built myself a jig, and then I get that first pass, then I sand, and then I go back and sort of relower it. That's the best way for me to do the frets. I really enjoy doing it that way. So that was question number two. All right, here we go. We've got a question that popped up from MSG. Hey man, any advice how to make nitro finish harder, stronger? Because right now I can scratch my guitar made with a nail. It doesn't happen. If your nitro is still wet, nitro takes a while to dry. That's the one thing that is problematic with nitro. Sometimes it actually never dries. But what you got to do is let it sit for about 3 weeks before you buff it. And if it's still not dry after that, you might have a bad can, which does happen. Those cans can go bad depending on how long you're sitting on them and if it goes through humidity change. That is usually the problem with nitro, is that it doesn't dry. So I was working on a gold top that I totally screwed up, and you'll see that video coming up shortly. Essentially, it'll be an apology video as long as I had worked on it. But I didn't let the nitro dry long enough, and then I tried to age it, and it came up in chips multiple times, which is just disastrous. But you got to let nitro dry. All right, so natural binding. The natural binding, I did not do natural binding on this double neck telly. The wood was very porous and soft, and as I was staining it on the test piece, I knew that I could see the stain bleeding in, and at that point there was no way I was going to get that look of the natural binding. Natural binding, I did a video on that with a burl top a couple years ago. What you've got to do is mask off the top of the body and the bottom of the body, first route it so you've got that 1/4 inch round over or whatever. Then you'll tape the body, tape the bottom of the body, and then you'll brush on lacquer, and then you'll pull the tape off, then stain the top of your body, and you should get a pretty good natural binding look. It's just a lot of taping and a lot of process to get it right, but there's a video of me doing that maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Look, I think it's called Natural Binding on my channel. I did it with a blue burl and a blue burl. It's a blue stain on a burl. So I think if you search natural binding Big D guitars, you'll find that. Take a look for that video. It's actually pretty good. It came out really nice. All right, so we did the orange peel question, fret slotting question. Bridge options was an interesting question. I had a guy post a question. What kind of bridges can you use for a telly and a telly neck with a 9.5 radius? Can I use a Tom bridge or a Gibson bridge? And you can use Gibson stuff on your Fender. You just won't have the same playability. So ideally you want your fretboard radius to be the same radius as your bridge. If you've got it mismatched, it's going to cause a huge amount of problems. So 9.5 radius, and usually you'll get a 12-degree or 12-inch radius on a Gibson. What happens then is it flattens out at the bridge and it's still curved at the neck. So you'll get a little bit of a playability issue. What you can do then is modify the Tom bridge to get that 9.5 radius. I've done that. It's usually not ideal, but that's one of the ways you can get a Fender and a Gibson to sort of match up. On this 12-string telly, I've got compound radius fretboards with a 12-degree radius bridge. So essentially what that means is as it flattens out going up the neck, I've got a little bit of a curve. So Kevin will play with the action to get it right. He's done that on a couple of his guitars. So what's going on, Tim? Thank you for making it. We've got 14 people. I think we had 15 people when we started. If you missed the beginning, I am reading questions off that were posted. And then if you guys post questions here, I'll answer them as we're going. The other question I had was on these podcasts, can I post them to like Apple iTunes or Audacity or some other streaming service? And the reason I, excuse me, the reason I keep them on YouTube is because I make a little bit of money doing it that way. iTunes and the other sort of streaming services, I don't get the same ad revenue. And so I do it on YouTube because I get a couple bucks here and there, which all the couple bucks help over time. So these podcasts will stay on YouTube because I actually have a decent amount of engagement here. And so people listen longer and I get a higher sort of click-through percentage. So, all right, MSG had another question on other finish options without nitro and oil. All right, so I get really high buff finishes off of True Oil. I have 3 or 4 master classes on True Oil where you can actually buff it out and it looks just as good as nitro. And I love True Oil because you can repair it at home and it's a really easy finish to apply and then it dries hard over time. So if you want to look up MSG My True Oil master classes, I think I've got like 2 or 3 full hour-long videos, including the buffing at the end. I love that product. I wish they sponsored me as much as I talk about it. I've even gotten a high buff finish out of Wipe On Poly. It really just depends on how much time and effort you want to put. The easiest finish to use is actually a 2K. It's toxic as hell, but you apply it, it goes on thick. You wet sand it and you're done. The stuff is really easy to use. That's why it's so heavily used among major companies, because it's a quick build finish with a lot of plastic, which I don't like at all. But depends on what you want. If you've got a paint grade body and you're painting it and you want it to look nice, you could do that. Troy oil is a varnish. It's like a tung oil extract or whatever. You can also get a high buff finish with shellac. The only problem I have with shellac is sometimes it dries a little bit soft, but you can get a high buff finish with shellac. I've done that in the past as well. All right, we got another question here. And anything on wood filler or grain filler? I put a flame top on an Ibanez body, so I'm wondering what the next best step is. Usually you don't want to use grain filler on a flame maple body, or at least a flame maple top. What's going to happen is that you're going to sort of cloud up the figure, and it's not going to look as good. With flame maple, you can just put a color on, put a sanding sealer on or whatever, and put your finish on, and you won't really have any problem. They use filler on mahogany because it's going to help fill those pores and you get that mirror glass finish. I really don't like using filler all too much. I don't like what it does to the body in terms of sonically. I know people will argue with me on that, but I just don't like it. I like kind of having the guitar breathe as much as I can, as much as possible. So filler is usually used on open grain woods like mahogany, and they'll throw it on the back to get that mirror finish. You don't need to use it on flame maple. So that's your question, Kevin. All right, Tim. Big D, how do you prepare the position of the neck pocket using a template? I bought a body blank and having a trouble getting the correct position. Oh my God, Buddy's online. Buddy, what's going on, man? I haven't seen you in a while. You were always leaving me comments. I'm hoping everything's all good. All right, so when you're positioning your template down, the thing you got to do is lay down a center line on your body. And then what you can do is take the neck and position the fret markers through that center line. And that's usually the best way. On my Jack Daniels Whiskey Barrel guitars, I have a video on using a laser level to get that neck straight through the whole body. That's what I've been doing for setups for a while. You can even get like a long piece of wood as a straight edge and line the center of the dots and the center of the nut through the body and then draw out your template that way. That's how I always get my center line right, and then your neck doesn't move across. Pine wood for a telly body. Pine wood is great for telly bodies. That was the first broadcaster that Leo Fender used. The reason he didn't continue using that Eastern white pine was because it was too soft and you ding it. But I've used pine. I've got a pine blank downstairs. It's a great tone wood. Pine is a Eastern hard rock pine that's been kiln dried, is a pretty good wood. It's like one of those weird soft but hard woods. Same thing with like cedar. It's interesting. All right. What else we got here? So that's pine wood. That's the first broadcaster. Take a look at that. Pure tongue oil with several coats buffed to 8,000 will make. Yep. Sorry. Getting tongue twisted here. But yeah, you can take true oil up to a high grit and then buff it. And I don't think I have. I don't know. Hold on. Let me see what I've got. I don't think I have any true oil buffed guitars up here. I have the Explorer, but I don't think I buffed the Explorer out. And then the black Strat, I used Wipe On Poly. This is true oil. No, this is true oil. That's high buffed true oil. That is outstanding. This is a flame maple neck that we had used. This front is true oil as well. It's got the Chicago skyline. This is the one guitar that just never gave me any credit. It was supposed to be awesome. Like, look at that. It's the Chicago skyline. But this is true oil buffed. And it's got a really high buff finish. Feels awesome and smooth. So you can definitely get true oil to buff out. So I'll put this back. All right, we've got a lot more people that are in from the beginning. If you're not following me on Instagram, I know Brad, the guitarist, says Instagram's for losers, but that's all right. I still love you. This is the double neck telly with the cherry burst that you guys had asked for. Look at that. This video is coming. I'm going to probably call this out one more time. Kevin's still asking about the true oil. Do I add a wax? Nope. That is true oil. Let it dry for 2 or 3 weeks and then let it go. So you let true oil dry for 2 or 3 weeks. You buff it out. After that, you got to make sure it's dry. You can wet sand it and get it real high. What's nice about true oil is the thinner coats build real quick, and then you buff it and you can run with it. All right. Yeah, this double neck, I'm hoping makes the front page of Guitar World magazine at some point. Kevin Bond of In Minor is going to be playing this a lot as they tour. And I'm hoping we get some press. They've got some energy behind them. It's pretty awesome. All right, anything on a satin finish? I haven't figured out a good satin finish that I'm really happy with. I've got a couple new materials that I'll be playing with, and I will figure out how to post those shortly. I've got this finish downstairs in the basement that I'll play with for a satin finish. I'll get there with you guys on a satin finish that I'm really happy with. All right, Scott's got a question. Is a 0.22 capacitor too bassy as a fixed position capacitor for an Esquire? I liked it for a neck, but not a clock tone. I don't know. That one's not too bad. You can roll with that. Really depends on what your tone is. I love using my Veritone switch in my guitars. I don't remember the exact capacitor values now because I've been doing it so long. Really, if you like the tone that you get out of a cap, roll with it. I've got one cap that I use. I think it's the 0.047 that's got a real kind of reverby tone in it, and that sounds awesome. So I like rolling with that one. Paulwani wood on a Strat. Yeah, that's a wood that gets some sort of negative press towards it. I'm working with a bunch of pieces downstairs in the basement for a special guitar that'll come out shortly. I'm kind of impressed with it. It's got like a little waxy feel. But right off the bat, it feels pretty good. So Don is commenting on a Satin. Don's opinion is build it with a clear finish and then knock it down. Yeah, I've got to play with satin finishes. I got to get there. I owe that to you guys. So the other thing I've been working on is this. Just finished this recently. There'll be a bunch of stories that come out on these guitars in the next couple months. But finished this up recently. Barnwood back, barrel top, and my white oak necks. These things are awesome. We use a figured white oak fretboard, and you can see how nice these are. I put like a really nice satin finish on this. This is actually a satin finish. I'm using kind of a custom mix to get to satin finish here. This is a low VOS floor finish that I knocked down and then wet sand with wipe on poly. And that really gets a nice satin finish. I don't buff it. I just leave it and I rub it with steel wool. And these necks feel so smooth. So this is a satin finish. It's hard to get a satin finish off a really heavy figured piece of wood. I've seen some guys on Instagram do it. None of them ever want to tell me how they do it. So I've got to figure that out. We're commenting, Don, did not mean to suggest trying to turn a gloss into satin. That never works, but with a gloss. Yeah, that is true. You cannot get a true clear gloss to be satiny. Even if you rub it out with steel wool, then you get like this cloudy finish. But you got to use a sort of satin product. There's a couple different satin products on the market. I've used some of the satin Stu Max stuff that works out pretty well. But this is an oil satin finish, and it comes out really nice. It matches that vibe perfectly. So more news on this, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun in about 3 months. Can't lead into that too much. All right. What else we got here? Is wipe-on poly more durable than oil? No. Wipe-on poly is very, very thin, and True Oil builds. Wipe-on poly just doesn't have the same sort of thickness to the material as True Oil. True Oil builds over time. For some reason, with wipe-on poly, you can really never get it to seal the wood perfecthere. I like True Oil. It dries a little bit harder than the wipe-on poly. Yeah, Don's answering some questions here down here too. Don is the man. He knows a lot. So anytime he chimes in on my comments or in anything else, I love kind of hearing his point of view. You should do some videos too, Don. We have a question. Have you done a video on how to do a solid color finish like paint? I don't do a lot of painting. Painting for me is hard. I don't have the shop to do it. I've painted here and there. The problem with solid colors is I love figured woods, and so I've always leaned towards figured woods versus paint. I just haven't done a lot. Plus, I don't have the spray set up to do it consistently, and I like doing woodworking versus spraying. So I usually do oil bases on figured pieces of wood because that's kind of what I like to do. All right, so X, what's up, dude? You spray wipe-on poly? No, I don't spray wipe-on poly. I just apply it with a rag. I haven't sprayed wipe-on poly. I have sprayed on True Oil, and that doesn't work all that well. You have to thin it. I just like wiping the finish on. That's the best. I have a face made for radio. Don says, yeah, no, I know. I know what you mean. I feel like that too sometimes. Good wood supplier. Guys, the best wood supplier that I know of is Kimball Hardwoods. This is from Kimball Hardwoods. It's hard to find a guy that'll get you a 9-inch wide piece of quilted maple in a day that is consistently dry and awesome to work with. He is the best hardwood supplier on the internet, and he's not going away. I've spent thousands of dollars with the guy, and every piece of wood is better. He has the best wood. Don't buy wood off of eBay from someone that doesn't have a lot of feedback. You will get screwed. It'll be wet. It'll explode on your bandsaw. Kimball has got a ton of wood, and I'm going to do a podcast with him shortly. It won't be a video podcast. We'll probably just upload the audio to YouTube, but we're going to do an interview with him coming up shortly. He's got an interesting story on how he got into wood. V, what's up, man? All right. More questions. I did have one more question I needed to answer from earlier. I got 40 of you guys now. All right, so we've got a couple questions here. Your Les Paul necks are no scuff joint. You ever encouraged a problem with breaking a headstock? No, and I've actually done a video on this. On my headstocks, I do two things that improve the design overall on the Les Paul necks. Number one, I add a volute, which I know that's not original or authentic. I don't care. And then I use a dual-way truss rod that has more material than what Gibson does with drilling it out. And I actually have a video ragging on Gibson for the design. My Les Paul is in the basement. I'm not going to grab that. Those are the two ways I avoid getting neck breaks. None of my necks have ever broken. I I think it's a terrible design. They have yet to improve it, and I know everyone wants to be original and authentic, but the design sucks. It does. I've actually got a Les Paul downstairs in the basement that I'm working on to fix it. All right, another question. Is it worth to buy a DIY kit and stain it, paint it, or overall build as a beginner? Depends on what you want. If you guys just want to build a guitar and you don't want to get into the equipment, buy a kit. There's nothing wrong with the kits. The necks aren't great. Sometimes the wood is a little wet and it'll move, but you'll get the bug and then you'll go buy a bunch of tools and you'll become a great builder. After about 5 guitars, your guitars hit essentially the same level as custom shops to some degree. You've got a pretty good basic set of materials after 5 guitars, bandsaw, tools that you can continue to produce stuff for yourself. So I wanted to make guitars. That was always my thing I wanted to do. I loved working with wood. Grandpa had a shop and I loved watching him work. And so for me, I wanted to build guitars. And that's why when I first started, I was doing bodies and necks. And I wanted to do that. So that was for me. Lots of questions. Hold on. So you start with kits. If you don't want to buy the tools, start with kits, and then you can dye, paint, whatever. You can do wood burning into them. You can do a lot of stuff with them. Kits are a lot of fun. I had fun building that kit with Brad. The guitars downstairs. That was enjoyable. I'm supposed to do a podcast with Brad, but we just had some problems this week. Let's see. Don mentioned Kimball is stock heavy right now. His price is awesome. Yeah, guys, go find Kimball before everyone starts getting back into their basement shops and buying all of his good stuff. Summer was slow for all of us. I know he's got some good stock coming up. Get your stuff now. The greatest thing about Kimball is that he'll sell pieces and he calls them out as pieces that aren't that great, that need a little bit of work. So you can get some highly figured pieces that he actually says have some issues. He's upfront and honest. And I have been able to make some of those pieces work. A lot of guys will be like, the piece is fine. And then it explodes on your bandsaws and dry or whatever. But Derek Kimball doesn't do that. And he calls stuff out that's got some checks and cracks. So that's awesome. Has the word authentic been run into the ground yet? Yeah, I know. Cannot believe that. That's just the biggest flub of, I'd say, the last 10 years. And it came from the company who continues to do flubs. Here we go. Oh my God, I'm getting way behind. All right. Does Gibson scale length allow for lower action versus a Fender scale length? No, not really. I think action length really, or action on a guitar is really about the setup. It's not about the scale or anything else. Your setup will determine your playability regardless of the scale length, regardless of the bridge. The better you get that nut tuned up and the truss rod set, that's where your action and playability come into sort of view. I think the vintage Fenders with the heavy radius, 7.25. If you get the action right with small frets, like those things are like wizards for me. I've got different cup shape to my hand. I've got a wide palm, but short fingers. So for me, I can grip that neck, and I love that. That's why I do a lot of V-necks for myself, because I've got a deep palm, but I've got sort of stubbiest fingers. So that's why I like the V-necks. You can get, as long as your nut is set up right, you can get that action set. A lot of shredders love the flatter fretboards. That's why they do the sort of higher radius. Those are really great for like tapping, easier to play. It really depends. I know for me, with my sort of palm and my fingers, I like the V-neck, and if I set the V-neck up right, I can really shred on that. So Gibson scale length versus Fender scale length, it's only a 1/4 inch off. Really, that doesn't mean too much. So here's a question from Don. What's the biggest really cool finish idea that you had that turned out to be a complete disaster in execution? I'm working on that right now. I have a epoxy pour on a molded top. I'm working with a guy called Moldy Creations on Instagram, and the epoxy I used turned to be a mess. It wasn't what I ordered, and I got some bubbles in it, and I've been working on that I thought was going to be awesome. We were supposed to do a show in LA this week, and I'm actually not going to get the guitar done. That was probably number one in terms of a complete disaster. I really thought I had it, and it didn't work out. For some reason, everyone hated the paint dump. Geppetto's guitars, tongue-tied. I'm part of a guild on Instagram, and he put a vote up for the dump finish. I think it was, showed me the results. I think it was like 200 to 75, something like that is where I'm guessing it ended. For some reason, guys didn't like the paint dump. I think the kids on Instagram don't realize Clapton and the full guitar and all that stuff. So that didn't work out that well. Before I learned how to do mist coats, I had ruined a lot of finishes. You take a beautiful burl, and then I would wipe on true oil and it would pick up. And so before I did mist finishes or mist coats, I had some finish issues, 10, 15 years ago. I haven't had too many finish flaws. I'd say the gold top has been a mess that I've been working on only because I rushed it and tried to age it. That was probably my biggest mistake. I'll put out there in a little bit. All right. What else do we got? I got a question about ideal straightness of a neck. Does it need to have a bow or not? Again, that's a playability question. If you adjust your truss rod right, you can get that level the whole way down. Guys are scared to adjust their truss rod. I was too. Just play with your setups, and you can get no bow. I don't like a bow on my neck. I like it straight, so I'll adjust that truss rod. The playability on my Whiskey Barrel guitars is awesome. I spend a lot of time getting them set up right, and oak is a really awesome neck wood because it's really, really strong. So I didn't get really any bows or need to play with it too much. All right, Tim, I love volutes. My Dean has a volute. Yeah, those guitar necks need a volute. It needs a. All right, I am way behind here. What do you prefer? True oil, wipe on poly. I prefer true oil. True oil always over wipe on poly. It builds better. The only difference between true oil and wipe on poly, two differences. One, true oil is a thicker finish and it's got a little bit more yellow tint. Wipe on poly is lighter, but it's clear. So depending on what you're doing, if you're working on a stain and you've got like a lot of browns, yellows, reds, go with a true oil because it'll wash the colors really nicely. If you're going with like a green, blue, black, you want to do wipe on poly because it's clear finish. You won't have some of the issues. Let's see. I bought a new kit off eBay. I thought it would be rubbish, but it had an excellent neck. That's good. Usually the kit guitars, the necks can be crappy. That's the one problem I have with the Chinese kits is that they force wood through the process. The frets will shrink. They'll get out of all whack, and you'll have a problem with the neck. That's the one thing I don't like about the Chinese kits. All right. Is Kimball shipping abroad? I think he is. He should. I don't know. I'm assuming some of the guys I know that buy from him are from overseas. Definitely see his website. Kimball most likely does. I'm not going to answer for him. I'll ask him that when we do the podcast. All right, Kevin's got another question. Advice on wood storage, humidity, time frame, movement after cutting. That's a good one. I did a video years ago where I cut some ebony and stacked it and let it sit. Ideally, when you resaw your wood, you want to let it adjust to your environment for at least 2 weeks. And then you want to stack it with stickers and let it sit with some weights. That way the wood will breathe and straighten out. So if you've got a piece of wood, you resaw it, you get it sanded flat. What you want to do is lay it flat, put pieces of wood in between and stack it up, then put some weights, let the air breathe through it. Usually 2 to 3 weeks in your environment should be good, especially if it's kiln dried. Air dried, it's a whole nother mess. When you resaw, most likely it'll move and explode on you a little bit, and then you have to do a little bit more waste trimming to get it set up right. Watching Mark on the Anderton interview is full. I didn't know he did an interview with Andertons out of the UK. I'll have to watch that. We'll be getting to a fight shortly anyway, so we'll get there. Have you built a body using Doug fur? Mike asked that. Yep, I have. The Strat build on my channel is me working with Douglas fir. Find it. You can see me building with Douglas fir. That's an interesting wood. Some of the soft hardwoods are really interesting. Cedar, eastern hardwood pine, and fir are interesting. Do you use graphite rods in your guitars? I do. I don't think I have. I don't have any up here. And the Mango guitar. Did I use graphite? I think the Mango Explorer. I think I put rods in here. Oh no, I didn't. This one I didn't, because I used that palmwood strip. But I usually do put graphite rods in the neck, especially for the Les Pauls that I'm building. It adds a little bit of strength through, and then, like I said, I add the volute, and that always adds a little bit. And if you use two-way truss rods, you've got enough material here to sort of help. Let's see. The dumb finish was awesome. Have you ever thought of doing an in-depth how to set up your guitar at home type of video? Yeah, I have. I just haven't done it. The problem with setup videos is that you need multiple cameras, and I did a fine-tuning video with on a nut. There's that video out there on how I sort of fine-tune my nuts, and that's hard to do. The camera angles aren't right, and it's a lot of video editing, but I can do that for you. If you guys have the tools, the setups are easy. I can do that. All right. How do you finish? Here's another one. How do you fix fret sprout on a finished maple neck? Yeah, it's a huge pain. If your fret is budding out, the best thing to do is tape off on each side, get some sandpaper, and just do that. That's usually the best advice I can give you. And then what you can do is then get higher grit. Start with like a 320 with taped off sides, sand it off, then get up to 600, and you can pull the tape off then and get up to like 800 and smooth it out and then buff it. That's easy to do. All right, another question. Can I convert a 22 fret to a multi-scale? No, if you're doing a multi-scale, you can't do a conversion. That's usually not a you can't convert a 22 fretboard to a multi-scale. That's a pain. You'd be better off just hand cutting and slotting it yourself. I sprayed nitrocellulose lacquer and with some orange peel. How do you fix that? I answered the orange peel question at the beginning of this video on how to fix that. Let's see. Thank you for your channel. Henry, yes, I do. I know. I've called that in the past. I've called that out as a problem. Sorry, my brain does not sort of process words correctly. No, give me 2 more minutes. Someone wants to play Fortnite, and I tell them no, because it won't come out right. All right, what's the ideal moisture content for guitar building? When you go to Home Depot and you buy a piece of wood and try to use it for guitar building, those pieces of wood are usually sort of 10 to 12% humidity levels, and kiln drying wood that you get at a hardwood lumber shop are like 8%. That's ideal. If you are buying wood, you want to buy wood from a lumber store. Their process of drying is a little bit longer and it's more stable. They want to get down to 8%. That is the ideal humidity level for your wood. Ever use playing cards to shim a neck? Yep. Tongue twisted today. Have you ever used playing cards to shim a neck? Yes, I have. I've also taken a piece of paper, folded it up, and use that at the base. And what I'll try and do is do like 3 folds, 2 folds, and then 1 fold. I have done that on setups and other guitars I've worked on. Are you going to do audio form podcasts? I answered that question earlier. The only reason I'm sticking on YouTube is because YouTube pays me, and that little bit of money I earned from doing these helps. So I will keep on YouTube. Plus, doing the podcast on another setup is I have to pay for the service, and that's usually a pain. And you've got to create a feed. It's a little bit more work. These are kind of easy. I'll get there. I'll figure it out. Close the door. 5 minutes. Go. Yes, go play Fortnite. Go. Close the door here. All right. We may have some degradation here as Fortnite gets going. So we're at 40 minutes, guys. I'll give you a couple more minutes here. Any other questions, post them. Do one-piece bodies warp over time, and are two-piece bodies stronger? This is a great question. And the bodies do warp over time, and if they don't, people are lying. It depends on the piece of wood and depends on what you're putting on. If you take a piece of mahogany at 15 inches wide and there's no glue lines, the wood will start to do this. It'll move. It's a big deal. That happens. It's real. I worked at a lumber shop where most of the time when we get big pieces of wood like that and people wanted the consistent grain lines, we would get our thinnest saw blade and we would rip it right down the middle, and then we would re-glue it and match up the figure and lines perfectly. And then we would sand it, and we would do that because one pieces of wood tend to warp. Now, on Les Pauls, it's different. One piece of wood and you glue on a maple cap, yeah, that's not going to bend. But if you're taking a piece of wood, and you're not putting any glue or anything else on it, most likely it'll warp. The 12 strings guitars, the double necks that are coming out with one piece of wood from Gibson, I think they're going to warp. I'm pretty sure of it, actually. All right, Tim, I'm missing your Parenthood reference. Oh, yeah, my son. He wants to play Fortnite. What else? Run the help off. Yeah. He will eventually start doing this, I hope, at some point. When would you use a humidifier or dehumidifier? I keep my shop in the basement, so I don't need a humidifier running. I've got a consistent temperature down there. Don't really have any issues. The broadcast is fine. It should be okay. The last question I have on this was, how do you fix major issues and when do you know to kill a guitar? That is an interesting question. Guitars are pieces of wood, and if you get a chip out or whatever, you can fix it with epoxy and sawdust to sort of fix necks. I don't think I have that guitar up here. One of the first necks I built, now it's in the basement. The first guitar necks I built, I put the template down, and as I was routing, the template slipped, and I've got a huge gouge right here on the neck, and it was my grandpa's piece of wood and felt like an idiot. And I took some of the shavings and epoxy, filled it in, and left it. It's my guitar. It was one of my first builds, and I kept it. So it really depends on what you're doing. If I'm building a guitar for a customer and I screw it up, I'm going to eat it. I'm not going to put a guitar out there that's terrible. Now, if I make a mistake on a guitar for myself, I'll probably just leave it. I think the most interesting video I've seen was Dan from Stu Mac fixing a what was it? Someone's broadcaster guitar body where he matched up the grain to a piece of ash and then rerouted it and then glued it in and then fixed it. That was an interesting video because it just shows how much you can do to save a guitar body. If you take off too much material from the neck, usually it's hard to put it back. On the white PRS kit I've got here, if you remember, I added a strip to this because I wanted a V-neck. And adding that strip, I flattened off the back of the neck, glued on another piece of wood, and reshaped it to get to my V that is good for my hand. So a lot of times, if I am producing a guitar for a client, I screwed up, I will start over. If I have a guitar for myself, and when I'm doing my experimentation, I will usually keep it. You can do a lot to fix major issues. If you guys have other questions on salvaging guitars, send them to me. I will answer them. So, all right, a couple more questions. We're at 45 minutes. Here's the last question, maybe, if someone else wants to ask another one. Do you go by different moisture percentages for different wood species? And can you explain multi-laminatics? Why are they so strong? Most of the time, and when I go to Owl and Hardwood Lumber in Chicago, all the wood's been kiln dried to the same 5 to 8%. That's from exotics to domestics. That wood is ready to use, and it's in a climate-controlled shop where they control the moisture. So when I buy the wood there and I bring it home, I let it sit. When I've bought wood from wholesalers, sometimes it's been kiln dry, but then they leave it outside. It picks up a little bit of moisture. All I'll do is I'll bring that wood back inside, get a fan blowing on it, and let it sit. Ideally, if you buy wood, let it acclimate in your shop for a month before you use it. I've got 2 shelving stacks in the basement of stuff that is sitting and stickered and ready to use. And then anytime I want some pieces of wood, I'll just grab them. So just depends on what you're doing, but let the wood sit in your shop, let it acclimate to your environment, and you should be good. That's one of the things when you're shipping guitars across the country. I do a lot of guitars down to Florida and New Orleans. I always tell the guys, like, hey man, you're going from a cold climate to a warm, humid climate. That guitar neck will move. Let it sit in the box for a couple of days. When you pull it out of the box, then let it sit for a couple more days. Sorry, that's just the way it is. And a lot of times with my guitars, I don't have heavy finishes on them, especially in those guitars. So you got to let the stuff acclimate. The thicker the finish like this, the less you have to worry. The thinner the finish like those, the more you have to worry. All right. Can you recommend indie shop with guitar kits? Yeah, Crimson Guitars has some good kits. I'm trying to do a collaboration with him. He's got good kits. The solo music gear stuff is pretty good as well. That's the SG kit. I've got 2 kits from them. I like them. I'm going to do another kit video here. Does 100% pure tung oil waterproof a guitar to protect it from wood and human? Yes and no. No finish other than these finishes are like totally impermeable. Moistures in the wood and the temperature will cause things to react anyway. It's with lighter finishes, it's not fully waterproofed. This stuff is essentially a plastic coating on your guitar body. The oil finishes let stuff breathe a little bit more. So I have a cheap acoustic that the bridge came off. I glued it back, but then it came off again. I suspect the wood glue was rubbish. It could have been that if you had an old bridge and you stuck it down, did you clean off the old glue? Got to clean off that old glue before you put glue down. So if you take the bridge, make sure the glue is off the back, make sure the glue is off the body, clamp it together. You should be okay. If you take glued on piece and a glued on piece and you put it down, it's got nothing to adhere to. So before you re-glue that bridge, make sure you're sanding it so you get some wood grain to the wood grain on the body. That's how you get it to stick. Oh, it's still, if you sanded it down and it didn't stick, then definitely go buy some new glue. If your glue is over a year old, If you're using Elmer's wood glue or Type-On wood glue, glue over a year old or through a lot of temperature changes loses its stickiness or whatever. So don't use that. All right. Yeah, living in Florida now, nothing is 5 to 8%. Yeah. If you're in Florida, which is my, big thing to my wife, I'm like, if you're in Florida trying to build guitars, you're going to have some problems. You got to have a fully climate controlled shop. Being in your garage doesn't work. That temperature change is a huge pain. So, all right. We are at 50 minutes. I'm hoping the end of this didn't degrade too bad. I think my son is on Fortnite here. My son's fully on Fortnite. I was playing with the microphone here for a second. Any other last questions from anybody? Bueller? Nope. Thanks for watching, guys. This was a long one. One last question. Regarding your collaborations, have you thought about collaborating with Reba, Pete? Yeah, I've got a collaboration coming with Brandon Dion. If you watch my Instagram account, I'm working on a guitar for him. I really enjoy doing collaborations. Just got to make sure that you don't get ripped off and you get what you want out of them. Yeah, I think we'll do another live video in 2 or 3 weeks. If you guys want to just send me questions, I'll answer them. I've got a couple topics. I want to start doing some of the interviews with other guys as well. I've got Lucky Dog on the hook. I got Derek Kimball on the hook. I've got Kevin Bond on the hook. Trying to get Justin to do interview as well, but he's busy with an album right now. Does a Patriots hat improve guitar? No Patriots. Bears. I'm in Chicago, so no questions there. Hope you guys enjoyed. I think we got to like 50 viewers, maybe. One of these days we will. It's funny, when I post these, I get a ton of viewers right off the bat after posting these. But enjoy talking to you guys. Enjoy your Sunday morning. I've got to go change, take a shower, and this video is coming. I know this is the third time I flashed it, but you guys asked for a cherry burst or a black cherry. It's the 12 string coming. This thing is awesome. Got a little bit more work to do to that yet today. Have a great weekend, guys, and we'll see you in the next video. See ya.